Welcome to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome in, listeners, to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast. We're always talking everything college hoops. You could have been anywhere else on the dial, but you chose to be here with us, Mike and Gus, and we appreciate that. There are a number of things to discuss, but the first thing we need to discuss is Happy New Year. Mike, how in the world was your New Year? How were your holidays? Let's catch up a little bit. Is everything okay on your end? Do you have any New Year's resolutions you want to share with the listeners out there?
Yeah, my resolution is never trust Marquette in a big spot. That's my resolution. I mean, how many times am I burned by Woj? Went out to Milwaukee last year, watched him gag it at home against Georgetown. Half of those players aren't even on the team anymore right now when they could have tied for the Big East title. Never trust Marquette in a big spot. But outside of that part, I'm doing pretty well.
All right, good. Listeners, we hope that you're sticking to your New Year's resolutions thus far. And we hope that you guys are following through with whatever that New Year's resolution might be. Eat, the typical one is work out or whatnot. We hope that your New Year's resolution is to, one of your New Year's resolutions is to just spread some kindness out there. Let's spread some kindness. So welcome in. Conference play is underway, which translates to one of the reset buttons here in our sport. And the beautiful element that our sport includes is the multiple layers of hope. The first layer of hope that we always talk about on the podcast is the start of the season. All 353 teams have that hope that they can win a national title and do some damage. The second layer of hope is the conference season. It presents another opportunity for every team. Even, 14-0 Texas Southern and every other team that was tripped up early and every team that was waiting on the second marking period for transfers and stuff like that over the holiday break has a reason of hope. So we're at that second level of hope here, and we're going to discuss a couple of different things right there. And every conference tournament, the third level of hope, provides an invite to the big dance with the auto bid. And then finally, whether it be the NCAA, the NIT, the CBI, or whatever other place you get invited to, whatever party you get invited to, provides a realistic opportunity for a championship. It dangles the carrot of a trophy hoisting, a net cutting, a t-shirt wearing opportunity. So with the season at the point where it is right now, to hit the reset button, Mike, let's hit the reset button and revisit a few items and a few selections that we've had in the college basketball season. Mike, let's just talk player of the year, because this is one of the foggiest items and one of the foggiest things that we've had at this point in the season in the past many years. There's no definitive leader right now. I thought Cole Anthony might pull it off with his opportunity and his usage rate inside the UNC offense. Mike, who is on the select list for you to win player of the year that you currently have as the calendar turns to 2020? Who are these player of the year, candidates that we need to pay attention to that maybe is a little cloudy right now?
A bunch of players jump out. Of course, Cassius Winston has that look. Had a career-high 32 points, 9 assists, 11 of 19 from the field in that 87-69 blitz of Michigan, by the way. I heard you talking with, who are you talking with about who are the top coaches in the Big Ten? The March to Madness gentleman you had on.
Russell.
Yeah, Russell. So
Russell brought up the question, actually.
I was laughing to myself when you guys are saying Juwan Howard, because to me that's such a knee-jerk reaction. Here's a guy, he's coached 5 games, everyone's fired up, they made a bunch of threes. Folks, this may be the toughest conference in the country. Archie Miller's an excellent coach. Just because he doesn't have 36 stars worth of players doesn't mean he's not a great coach. Juwan Howard inherited Beeline's team. So we can't accurately judge whether Juwan Howard is a phenomenal coach or not. He's got Martelli next to him. Let's see what happens. He's going to have to recruit, and I certainly think he can do that. But in games like this, where he's on the road, let's see how he can perform. So first one is Cassius. He's been great. Before Sunday's win, he had 21 points in each of his last 3 games. He was 21-4-6 in a 20-point blowout home win over Illinois. He got them past Northwestern on the road. They sat out Western Michigan with a bone bruise, but he's been back. He's been incredible. Gus, right now he's a first-team All-American, no doubt. Write it in. Sparty's 4-0 after all those losses beginning of the year, right? People worried about Sparty. Don't look now. They're 4-0. They got a game and a half lead in the Big Ten.
Here's my 2 cents on Cassius Winston. He's playing with joy. And if he's going to play with joy, then I think he's going to play at the exact level that you just spoke to. And I think if he's going to play with that joy and that level of efficiency, then I think we need to include Michigan State in the Final Four conversation and national title conversation, even though they've taken on a couple of losses early.
Next one I'll say is Marcus Howard going back to Marquette. He's been great. He has zero help whatsoever, zero. And I'm telling you something, Woj is on the hot seat. It's on fire right now because they underperformed last year, and he's got nothing there. He lost the brothers who ended up transferring out, so he's got a lot to answer for, but Marcus Howard certainly does not. Leading scorer in the country, 25.8 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. He's 45% from three-point range. That's incredible. 85.6% from the line. He only had 6 points in the blowout loss to Maryland. He does seem to struggle in big games. What I mean by big games are games in which it's really a turning point game for them. So, for example, they blew out Villanova, right? Big win, but they were coming off of losses. People were concerned. Now it's another big opportunity for them. He's home. They're playing Providence. He played great tonight, but they lose. So Marcus Howard, I think, has such little help that he turns into this bomber from beyond the arc. If he was on a team with some really good players, he could do some damage. So we'll get into whether he's Kemba Walker light or not in the NBA, and people are going to tell me he's undersized, just like they said Trae Young was undersized. This kid can play, Gus, let me tell you.
Listen, there's no doubt that this kid can put up numbers, and there's no doubt that he can play. And this is part of what we've talked about on the podcast previously, where the college game provides opportunity for kids just like this. They provide opportunity for the undersized fives, the 6'8" guy that can bully people around and rebound the ball and be a defensive deterrent at the rim. And it also provides for unbelievably gifted players like Marcus Howard that are under 6 feet tall, that can shoot the heck out of the ball and break you down off the dribble. Here are the two things I have for Marcus Howard. Number one, I think if you're going to be the player of the year, he has to finish better at the rim. His craft around the rim has improved, no doubt. That has been an improved element of his game, but the actual finishing around the rim has not been at the high level that you want to see from a Trae Young, like you mentioned, or a Kemba Walker, like you mentioned. Those guys could take it to the hole, finish at the rim through contact. Is Marcus Howard better at that? Yes. Is he at the level of a Trae Young or a Kemba Walker? Absolutely not. And that's just physical limitations. Like, he has the physical limitations of being under 6 feet tall that Kemba Walker and Trae Young do not have. Like, they had that little extra, like, inch and a half of finishing to get to the rim and finish strong at the hole. So that's one thing I would say from him that holds him back. If you're going to look at him as like an NBA prospect or player of the year type guy, if you're going to nitpick on his game because he's been unbelievable, he's the leading scorer in the nation, that's the place to nitpick at him. And that's the place where I'll say, like, I hope that he can improve that little part of craft that has had a large improvement over his career towards the end of the season.
And last one I'll mention, we have a couple quick ones, but the last major one, of course, is Luka Garza. What this kid is doing is unreal. They lose Bohannon, the senior, for the rest of the year for hip surgery. Garza's 22.5 points, 10 rebounds, 1.5 blocks. He's 57% from the field, which is impressive. He's got 218 field goal attempts coming into tonight. Incredible stuff. Hawkeyes are 10-4 right now. They're down in Nebraska trying to fight it out. They're losing at the half. But they have wins already over Iowa State, at Syracuse, and home to Cincinnati. Luka Garza, great job.
I think you can add, Jordan Noir from Louisville, Obi Toppin, I'm sure Miles Powell's consideration. There's a couple other guys that you mentioned that could be in that mix. I thought that Cole Anthony would be obviously injured. They're not going to do that. We've been robbed from the game of a couple of players that have been injured, and that thing has opened up the field. So whoever wants to take this title of best player of the year, it's still kind of wide open. Like, nobody has a stronghold on it currently where they're like, oh, that's the guy I'm voting for now. Or, oh, that's a two-man race, like Denzel Valentine and Buddy Hield. Like, that was not, like, there's no candidates like that currently. So I hope as conference play starts to take hold here, we have one or two of those players that really takes hold of this race, and we can kind of focus on that. And that's great for the college game because we want that storyline. We want those guys. But also at the same time, I think it's kind of cool that, there could be somebody that totally pops. If you remember, like, Oladipo, like, totally popped the second half of the season and then came on super strong, wasn't even on, like, the Naismith list, and then ended up finishing second to Trey Burke in the College Player of the Year, conversation. So if we have somebody like that, I'm all down with somebody having like an Oladipo type season where they explode the second half of the season as total surprise to us on the college scene. Mike, Final Fours. Now, my preseason Final Four has kind of gone to the wayside. I picked Harvard. Seth Towns is hurt, is now in the transfer portal. Our guy Bryce Aiken is now in and out of the lineup. UNC Cole Anthony was my Obi-Wan Kenobi. I thought that he would use the Force and really, solidify the point guard position, and UNC would be back to old UNC. Kentucky can clearly beat anybody and can clearly lose to anybody at any time. Ohio State is taking on water that looked good early. So, Mike, hit the reset button here for us during this second part of the season, the reset season. If you have a Final Four or a team that you really like who are you looking for, and what team do you think might stand out as maybe like a potential Final Four team for you? I
don't have a Final Four specifically. What I have is I think Duke and Gonzaga have separated themselves from the rest of the pack. I don't think they're unbeatable in conference on a road game or whatever, but I think that in this year, last year was everyone just sides with the big stars. That's not the case this year. So Mike Krzyzewski, Mark Few, Hall of Fame coaches, two of the greatest ever. Fine.
Right.
What they have are true teams. You want to say Vernon Carey's a stud, that's fine. Yep. But they have players in roles, and that's when the great coaches excel. When you want to say Belichick, do your job, same thing. So Krzyzewski doesn't have to worry about switching to zone because they don't play man. Mark Few doesn't have to worry about a certain player getting a certain number of shots. That team that Few took to the finals, and they easily could have won it, everyone had a role. Shemek had a role. Williams had a role. Point guard, everyone, Perkins was there.
Nigel Jim Goss, right?
Yeah, Goss was there, right? Yeah. Exactly. All those guys had a role. That's the teams that are separating. So to me, those two are above everyone else because everyone has a role. I think Texas Tech could get there after watching them absolutely take Oklahoma State to the woodshed because he's got Chris Clark, the transfer from Virginia Tech. Jahias Ramsey's phenomenal, okay? And he's got a history of success with his coaching. So, but I put him a notch below. Outside of that, man, I think it's absolutely wide open. I am not in any way attacking your Final Four because it could happen. I know Seth Towns is out, but Harvard's played great. Yale's played great. Any one of these small schools, and don't sleep on the Ivy, could make a run. Why couldn't UNC Greensboro make a run this year? They have a couple impressive wins there in the SoCon. So I think it's a year that we're going to have the true coaches with balanced teams separate, and I think we have a chance to have some really nice VCU, George Mason-like teams because the top-end talent just is not there.
Totally agree with you on the VCU, George Mason flavor. I think the key is now, let's try to identify some of those teams, some of those teams that are kind of sleeping in the weeds that maybe, this podcast, CBS's podcast, Rob Dosser's podcast, Three Man Weed podcast, though all of our podcasts are kind of ignoring. I think the key is to really try to refine and try to find that team that could be that 11 seed, that 12 seed, that George Mason that makes it to the Final Four. I totally agree with you there, Mike. And I think we're all going to be we're going to be, shifting through and stifling through all of the stats and all the metrics to be okay, who is that team? What could that team be? What could that team look like? What does that team need? And we're going to use every single, determination. Do they have lead guards? Do they play defense? Do they offensive rebound? Do they have enough returning starting minutes? Everybody's going to use their own equation. So I think once everybody digs in, it's going to be fun to see who thinks that surprise team is going to be. All right, Mike, All-America teams. They're still so foggy. Marcus Powell has been hurt. He's been hurt multiple times. Gonzaga doesn't have the huge guy with big numbers. They're waiting on Tilly, and we know that you're not going to buy in on Corey Kispert being an All-America.
Dear Lord. Tilly's already sat out a game, by the way. Unbelievable. It's fine.
Maybe we were a year early because last year we championed Peyton Pritchard and Kamar Baldwin as All-America guys. Mike, which 5 players do you think belong on that team thus far early on in your eyes? We're not looking for a player of the year here. We're just looking for an All-America team. Who are 5 guys that you think, Yeah, these guys really caught my attention, and these guys deserve All-American consideration from here on out and need to be on the radar.
I've watched a boatload of games. I challenge anyone to say they've watched more games than I have. I've been all over the place.
I'm going to challenge you and say I've watched almost as much.
Okay, besides you. Besides anyone on this podcast. I've taped games. I've watched games. I've watched them taking a dump. I've watched them in the car. I mean, to explain that one. All of I'll go get Panera Bread, and I'm watching it on my phone. I'm coming home. That. I'm watching 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there. So let's call this, Gus. Let's call this a segment. Let's make this in every podcast segment. Call it Who's Got the Look? Okay, thank you, Prince, for that right there. Okay, so who's got the look? These are people that have caught my eye that I've been watching saying, wow, either really impressed, did a fantastic job, or maybe even the other way, not doing a fantastic job. First one is Malachi Flynn over in San Diego State. How you doing? Okay, you got the look. Transfer from Washington State. He wanted a higher profile program, and if you Google his name, by the way, the beat reporters from Washington State were blasting the guy. Give me a break. He's allowed to leave if the coaches are allowed to leave. He sat out a year, and now he's a junior. He's starting for the undefeated Aztecs. Flynn was great in San Diego State, 77-68 road win at Utah State. He's averaging 16 points, 3.5 boards, 5 assists. He's shooting 43% from three, and he's 80% from the free throw line. Fantastic. San Diego State is the real deal. This is not your mother's Mountain West. This is a legit situation. Gus, I got to ask you. Yeah. According to their schedule on Ken Palm, that was the toughest Mountain West game for San Diego State. Toughest road game, and of course, in the conference. Yep. Looking at their schedule, and you look at the percentages here, they're pretty high, man. The games that they're talking about that are less than 70% chance of winning is at New Mexico on Wednesday, January 29th, who's dealing with some people who are injured and suspended. They're trying to get the players back. I think Bragg is back tonight, and at Nevada on Saturday, February 29th. So I got to ask you, partner, do you think San Diego State will go undefeated in the regular season in the Mountain West?
This is a great question because this was like a Twitter conversation. Shout out to one of our listeners, Berg. What up, Berg? He asked myself and some of the three-man weave guys, who do you think has a better chance of going undefeated, Gonzaga or San Diego State? I was the only one that said San Diego State on that little conversation. And I said there's less potholes. And once they get through Utah State, who isn't all the way whole because Kita isn't exactly fully integrated into the situation, still coming off the bench and in and out of the lineup. And the WCC is much improved. And you're going to run into one of those situations on the road in WCC, especially with Gonzaga being the number one team in the country. If you're the number one team in the country, that believes an unbelievable amount of pressure every place you go. Every place you go is going to be packed. Every place you go is going to have that, like, can we beat the number one team? Is this the time that we're going to make our season? And then this goes back to the conversation we've had multiple times on the podcast, Mike, where is that going to be the game that the coach talks about at the dinner at the end of the season, or the award ceremony at the end of the season, where we beat the number one team in the nation? And Gonzaga has that on their back the whole entire time, where San Diego State does not. Also, level of play in the Mountain West is not nearly the level of play that it was last year, and not nearly the level of play it is in WCC this year. So I'm with you. There's a possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there's a pathway for San Diego State to go into the conference tournament undefeated. Like, there's a legit pathway for that to happen. We've seen what Dutcher did. He won the conference tournament after being and got to the NCAA tournament with that team. And I'll tell you right now, Malachi Flynn, baller. He is exactly the type of player that we talked about previously, whether it be with Kemba Walker, whether it be with that type of player where he's this combo guard that can do a little bit of everything, is fearless, and he is playing with house money because he is playing in his second spot and is like, you know what? I'm going to get this right. And you love when you have a player that can get it right the second time around. So I'm with you there. I think Malachi Flynn, he's unbelievable. We can talk about Wetzel and Matt Mitchell and those guys as well. But I think that this is a legit shot for them to go undefeated.
I can't believe three-man weave said Gonzaga. That for a pod that knows so much and researches so much, that is certainly frustrating. Folks, was that done, Gus, was that done before the Bear win at Portland and the massive struggle against Pepperdine at home?
But yes, it was done before.
I mean, guys, listen, and here's the thing. People are sleeping on BYU because they say, oh, it's BYU, they stink. Okay, guys, we'll see. Well, I will come back to you on this one. No one thinks BYU is good because no one watches Channel 374 and DirecTV, the BYU channel. I do, okay?
I do as well. By the way, the quality of that channel is terrible.
Terrible, horrific. But I'm watching it. And folks, even St. Mary's, and we know my thoughts on St. Mary's, and a nice 4-overtime loss at Pacific, you hit the over. Well done. But they certainly could upset Gonzaga at home. I mean, guys, come on. I mean, give me a break. It's just, you got to think outside the box. It goes back to the gambling thing. You can't just sit there and just look at the metrics, or you can't sit there and say, this team's terrible, this team's great, this team's going to blow them out. You got to go a little deeper. But certainly that was one of them that a little how you doing. The second one here is Washington, who I did not have a lot of high hopes for coming into this year, but Isaiah Stewart, 6'9", 250-pound frosh on Washington, he caught my eye. Gus, he's everything that I thought Noah Dickerson would have been and should have been, except Dickerson did not have the mean streak that Stewart does. Stewart, 20 points per game, 9 rebounds, 60% from the field, and for a big man, 86% from the free throw line. You can take Precious Achiuwa in Memphis, and if you just simply go to the other side of the country, you're looking at Isaiah Stewart. They're very similar players. He's a weapon. He's a necessary weapon for a team that relies on the zone. Hopkins knows that they can give up rebounds. He's got to stay on the floor. 5 double-doubles last 6 coming into the destruction of USC the other night. Thank you for in-game wagering. Pathetic loss. Terrible loss. USC played awful. Huskies had the bounce-back win after the tough loss to UCLA. They should have won that game, but when Jake Kyman, who's averaging 5 points per game, goes 7 to 12 from three-point range, it's just not your night, and that's fine.
Right.
Stewart's a man inside and out. Gus, I think Isaiah Stewart's a top 20 NBA draft pick. I think he's a power forward-esque player in the NBA. He's got a nice touch. He can shoot it. He's still only a freshman, and he is an anchor in that zone. Jaden McDaniels can continue to go nuts, and he can continue to throw balls off of people's head when he's getting a technical foul sitting in the stands. That's great. Stewart is the man who runs that team, and I've been really impressed.
I've been super impressed with him as well, and I think you say top 20 NBA draft pick. He's a top 10 pick. No,
could be.
I think without question. And you know what? You mentioned their pace of play and the way that the way that Washington designs the game. If somebody's going to go 7 for 12 from 3-point land, then that's what they're vulnerable to. They're vulnerable to that hot streak from one guy, same way that UVA is. And if that happens, then that's the way that they're going to lose a game. But unless that guy has that game, then you know what? That's not going to happen. And I'll tell you, Nas Carter, another guy when you talk about the junior swingman, has done a little bit of everything. He's shooting from 3, he's blocking shots, he's scoring points. So they have a wingman that can do it all. And let's not forget the Kentucky transfer Green. They have a solid man at point guard. They have 2 NBA lottery picks, or 2 NBA first-round picks. How's that? Manning the wings. And then they have Nas Carter, who's a dynamic, game-changing wing. They legit have 4 impact players that people and a pace of play and a characteristic of their team that is going to be really interesting. So I'm totally with you. With Washington, and I like to hear your one last one. What do you think about your one last one?
Last one's off the beaten path, and this was watching the grainy 1980 channel 374. I've been banging the drum all year for BYU. We'll have plenty of times on future pods to go over BYU.
Yeah.
I really can think, and I got a future on them winning the West Coast Conference. Great odds. Ooh. However, I need to mention a player I saw against BYU. Senior forward for Oral Roberts, Emmanuel Nikezi, okay? Nikwezi. I can't even say his name, but I'll tell you something.
It's Nikwezi. Great.
Nikwezi. He's a man. 4 consecutive double-doubles, 16 points per game, 10 rebounds per game. He's 4 of 8 from 3. He even does that as well. The guy's a load inside. He single-handedly brought the Golden Eagles back. Kevin Obanor is there as well, but he's a little, my in and my out. Nikwezi is a man. He's Charles Oakley with touch in Division I. I'm not saying he's going to be that in the NBA, but really impressive. Had injuries last last year. He's a force. Oral Roberts, by the way, has been a very hot cover team. If you look them up, they've done very well against the spread. He had 23-17 against BYU. And what it did was it illuminated the weakness for BYU to me. If you have a four-man, if you have a power forward that can go down outside and bang with Childs and score on Childs and make him play defense, that's what BYU is going to give up. They guard the three very well. They're top 10 as per Ken Palm in defensive three-point efficiency. They shoot the three really well. They break pressure fine. Childs is a man inside, can shoot it, but that's the weakness for BYU. So I had to mention him because in watching BYU and falling in love with the Cougars, I was impressed by him, man. I'm not saying he's going to be in the NBA. I'm not saying that. But this guy's a force, and he's a force in conference play. So be hot on Oral Roberts, folks, if you want to make some money.
Listen, if you're looking for a little like off the beaten path, like just like Mike said, then you got to the right place. Mike, excellent research on the Quezzy. That's fantastic. All right, let's go to some sneaky teams. You talked about a sneaky player from Oral Roberts. Shh, Mike. Who do these listeners need to buy a future wager on that still might be undervalued in your college basketball mind? Because as you know, we talked about earlier on the podcast, both of you and I have watched a ton of games. What are some of the who are some of the teams that you've seen where you're like, oh, well, this team's frisky, this team's sneaky. I kind of like this team moving forward. What do you got for the listeners out there? Because I think this is the part that people are going to come to the podcast for and want to hear.
Well, there's no black and white, man. I mean, I as a math guy, I sometimes want it to be black and white, but that's why I pick a ton of games. And if you follow me on the Action app, and you can, go to the Action Network app, follow Mike Randall. I pick a ton of games because it helps me focus, and I start to get some trends. Now, trends aren't always true, but what we know is that teams that are not doing well against the spread usually regress positively to the mean because Vegas will adjust their lines, and teams that are doing really well against the spread usually regress negatively because Vegas adjusts their lines and they lose. Vegas always wins. However, these are some things to keep in mind. First of all, only two home teams in the Big Ten have failed to win outright. Northwestern against Michigan
Correct.
State, by the way, they covered, and Nebraska against Rutgers, they didn't cover. Translated, the only team to cover on the road in Big Ten play was Rutgers at Nebraska. Keep that in mind as you place your bets. It was true again tonight. No Geo Baker for Rutgers. Made me pick Penn State. It was only 1.5. Big mistake. Rutgers wins and they cover. So there could be some money line spots there if you want to take big underdogs. Right now, Nebraska, by the way, is beating Iowa.
We talked about that a little bit with Lila when we talked about Maryland, and she brought that exact point up where the home teams have been really dominant in conference.
Next up, Alabama. 10-3 against the spread. They've covered 7 in a row, 9 of their last 10 games. Should have covered the Florida game. Depending on the line you got, they may have covered, but they've been live and Nate Oates has it going on, so pay attention to them. The other one, you've been saying this for years and I'm in. The Ivy is no joke. Enough of the Ivy. Forget about it. Yale is 11-2 against the spread. Paul Atkinson Jr. 16-7. Jordan Bruner Sr. 12-10. 35% from three-point range. Azar Swain hasn't even shot it well yet. Team is talented. Stop sleeping on them. They've covered 10 of their last 11 games. The only one they didn't cover was a win at UMass in OT, which I have to admit threw me off the stench a little bit because my brother-in-law is a UMass guy. However, they are the real deal. Stop sleeping on them. Stop it. I won my teaser with Harvard and Yale. Enough of this garbage. Yale on the road at Clemson, no problem. Folks, just stop sleeping on them. Not only can they win a game, they've done it multiple times now, but they are the type of team that no one wants to play. Very disciplined and very talented.
All right, I'll just give you my 2 cents here. Atkinson is like a multi-dimensional big. He's legit 6'10". He can do some damage down low. Is he limited athletically? Yes. Bruner is the next Mia One. He can do a ton of stuff offensively. He can do a ton of stuff defensively. He's a little bit longer than One. He's a little bit taller than him. And they run a ton of offense through him. And you mentioned Swain. Like every one of these teams that's going to do some damage needs that like knockdown shooter. Not only is he a knockdown shooter, he's a knockdown shooter from deep. He can launch it from 25 feet, no problem, with no conscience. He will definitely regress to the positive during the rest of the season here. So if you're going to look for one thing that might improve, I would suggest you pay attention to Swain shooting the ball. And that Yale team definitely is dangerous. And if Harvard can't get right and Aiken can't be like a Superman like he was last year, then this is the team you need to pay attention to in the Ivy.
I also think there's some small schools that we can pay attention to that are actually doing quite well. One of them is Fairfield. Fairfield's a team, they shoot the three, they attack. They've done a pretty good job this year. Fairfield's 10-3 against the spread, covered 7 of their last 9. I got thrown off the stench with them when they ended up playing a game. I thought they were going to cover there against Maryland. They didn't. But from that point, they've played very, very well. So pay attention to them. Stony Brook, despite having the coach there, Peichel went down to Rutgers a couple of years ago. They are solid. They have some athletes inside, play good defense, very solid. Can't wait to see them coming up against Vermont, I think, tomorrow night. They're 11-4 against the spread. They've covered 7 of the last 8. How about the Citadel? And I'll tell you the game where I got into the Citadel. I watched them. I know. I watched them against Illinois. Okay? And I watched that game, and I picked Illinois to cover, and I'm like, the Citadel's good. They're shooting threes. They're active. They run the break well. They have a system. Citadel, 8-3 against the spread. They covered their past 6 games in a row. No one knows this, Gus. Okay, so Vegas, I don't think, is adjusting the Citadel lines yet. Right. But be careful. They score a lot of points, and they do cover. And then, of course, we mentioned Rutgers, 8-4-1 against spread. Covered 7 of the past 8, 5 in a row, make it 6 in a row now. So those are some things that I noticed. Very impressive here against the spread teams. Stay on it. It's a trend. Could it regress? Absolutely. But it's something worth noting here. Oral Roberts at home in the Summit, I'm taking every time. Niquazi's a man!
Love that. Listeners, I think that's exactly what you come to the Screener College Basketball Podcast for Mike Randall's Action Network mind that's paying attention to those tight spreads. And I'll tell you right now, there's a conversation that we had about Rutgers and Penn State this week, this evening, and that people were actually fired up and paying attention to this game and like, what is wrong with college basketball? And I said, the rack is
wrong? What are you talking about?
The rack is on fire. Let's go, Rutgers. You nailed that right away. Okay, Mike, let's do this for the listeners. And I think every time you and I get together, I think this is something that we need to do. I think we need to crack a 6-pack. I'll make the, pretend crack. And we need to look at 6 games for the listeners and make sure that they're paying attention to these 6 games. We want your Action Network mind on these games. I'll give my 2 cents as well. But, Mike, you mentioned this very game. Stony Brook visits Vermont on Wednesday. This is the class of the America East. Mike, do you have a lean? Which way? Are you leaning Coach Becker and Anthony Lamb? Do you feel like the Seawolves might be on a little trend here? What do you feel this might define who wins the America East?
The thing with Vermont, here's the deal. Vermont, according to Ken Palm, is going to open as a 9-point favorite. I think that line's going to drop. If Vermont hits their threes at home, it's goodnight, Irene. They haven't been great against the spread because they weren't hitting their threes, but they've won 3 games in a row. They blitzed Lipscomb at home by 23.
Which is a great win.
They blitzed G-Dub, always a rival, by 25 at home, and then nice last-minute cover at Dartmouth away. It's a road game, whatever, 9 points. Right. So this is a tough call for me because Stony Brook does a good job, but 9's a lot. My lean is Vermont because they have been making their threes, and Anthony Lamb can make an argument for a third-team All-American selection.
Absolutely.
If they make their three, if you told me, Gus, that Vermont's going to shoot like 38% from 3, they cover no problem. Stony Brook's going to have to come up with a massive defensive game. I'll tell you, I'll look at the under because I don't think Stony Brook's scoring a lot at Vermont. So it's going to be a 120-ish sort of over-under game, but that's what I'm looking at. I will lean. It's a lot of points, but I will give the points right now because Vermont's played so well.
That's the place I was going to lean. I don't know if I was going to pick points here, but I was going to lean under because I could totally see this being a little bit of a rock fight because these two teams know each other really well. And plus, this might be the first game where there's like, students back on campus and that type of thing. So when you have that type of environment, sometimes that really amps things up and brings it to a different level. And plus, these have been the 2 best teams in the America East for the past 6 years. So if you're going to have a showdown like that, I think close game is the way to trend, but I think under might also be the way to trend. All right, Mike, let's go to Thursday. There's a ranked Memphis team who's a bit hampered with injuries and, of course, the no Wiseman against a ranked Shockers team from Wichita State. This is exactly what the ACC needs for a little validity and a little clout as far as the national landscape goes. So if you're going to lean one way or the other with Memphis or Wichita State, what are you feeling inside this ACC matchup?
Memphis has done such a good job since losing the big man, and I was concerned how they were going to do. They've really impressed me. I mean, they've been able to turn it around. They've beat NC State. They beat Bradley, which is certainly not easy. They ended up beating Tennessee, okay, with Lamont Turner on that team, Lamonte Turner.
Right.
But the loss to Georgia at home I thought was interesting. I think they're struggling a little bit. Gus, I have a problem backing a team on the road that shoots 67% from the free throw line. They had a horrific non-cover against Mississippi at home, which I love because I had Mississippi, because they can't make free throws. So here we go. Shockers, great defensively, tough place to play. Memphis doesn't make free throws. They're still adjusting. I'm going to give the 4 points. KenPom has it at 4. I'll give it Wichita State at home. I need to see it here from Memphis. Hard to back a poor free throw shooting team on the road at a tough defensive place, right?
Yeah, I think so. And if you can just get a little bit out of Stevenson, because he hasn't been completely right, if you can get a nice shooting game from him, and I'll tell you what, Wichita State point guard has been playing out of his head. That's been really impressive as well. I think if they can get solid play from the backcourt, I'm kind of with you. I'm liking that Shocker team, and I like the recipe that they have moving forward. And if they're going to be at home, like I know. A shout out to Jaden Gardner, like he from East Carolina. He went absolutely bananas and almost beat them on the road by himself. That got game of the century. Like he almost scored 30 points. It was amazing. He's going to work his way into like some sort of NBA draft like conversation because he's that talented. He's like Anthony Lamb light. But at the same point, I think if the Shockers can just get a little backcourt play, I think they're going to take this Memphis team too. I'm with you. How about number 3? How about on Thursday? How about we have number 24 Arizona visits number 9 Oregon? Amazing point guard matchup. Maybe one of the best point guard matchups of the season anywhere in the nation. In a line that was an underrated wing matchup. I just adore Chris Durante. He is fantastic. I think he's a sneaky NBA player. What do you feel like in the Pac-12? Let's get the Pac-12 a little love here. Do you think that Arizona has a chance to go on the road and beat this hot Oregon team and maybe make a statement and really cement themselves as a Sweet 16, maybe even a Final Four team?
Yeah, I'll make a statement. Take Oregon big in this game. I've seen Arizona many times soft as Charmin, Arizona. They got pushed around by St. John's. Terrible job over the break. Oregon is good. They're Final Four good. I don't care about the Colorado game. Infuriated because I talked about how I thought they were going to break the streak there. They shot 3 of 18 from 3-point range. Peyton Pritchard had 4 fouls with like 16 minutes left, and they still hung around and competed. And Colorado, who I'm not thrilled with either, by the way, showed their true colors. They're gagging it against Oregon State on the road, gagging it up at home on Sunday night when they had almost a double-digit lead there with about 5 minutes left. So, no, I think this is Oregon big. I think Oregon is great. You've been hyping Peyton Pritchard. You're absolutely correct. Duarte's fantastic. They got the big guy back inside after he was out for a while. They're a fantastic team. They're not going to get caught napping. Arizona doesn't know what's coming, and they don't play any defense at all. This game's going to open as a 3. I would take it up to 6. Oregon big.
I like what you're saying there. I totally agree with you, and I'm on board with you. I think that the X factor here is, what does Oregon do with Zeke Naji? If they can have Okoro, one of the other bigs, or Steph Mahad, they can have one of those guys kind of take care of him. If Zeke Naji has one of these games where he goes for 15 and 15, then this might be a different. The outcome might be very different. But I'm with you with Oregon. I've been on Peyton Pritchard since last year. I think he's one of the best guards in the country. You can argue him for first-team All-America right now. I don't think that's you could argue him for Player of the Year nationally right now, and that would be a valid argument. So I'm with you on Oregon. I think they have a ton of other pieces that are undervalued. So I like Oregon as well here. Mike, let's go to the 4th game in our 6-pack. Let's go to Maryland, and they're going to visit Iowa. We both mentioned Luke Garza. We think he's like, one of the most underrated players in the country. You have to talk about him as a first-team All-American, no doubt. Ahoy to our boy Luca Vasallo, who shares the same name. Is this a danger game for the Terps on a daring Friday night evening game? And we love these, Friday night used to belong to little people, and now there's a quasi, cool game, big game on Friday nights. What do you feel about Maryland after they win at win against Ohio State? Do you feel like this is a trap game when they visit Iowa?
Yeah, I think Iowa is big in this game. I think they will celebrate your birthday, by the way, on Friday, partner. I think they will do that with a big win. I do not trust Maryland in big spots whatsoever. Nice win over Ohio State tonight. I didn't see that coming, but I don't trust Turgeon. That a couple of those young guys transfer off the team. It's just Maryland is who they are. Okay, they could step up and actually put a big performance in, but I'm going to take Iowa at home because that game's going to project as a pick, or maybe Iowa won. Iowa may not be ranked by that point. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I'll take the home team there. Again, Big Ten home team, right? Why would I go against it?
That's exactly my only reason that I was going to say here. We've talked about this before with Lila on the podcast. We talked about this, a previous conversation, you and I, on this podcast. If you're going to pick a pick'em game, why wouldn't you pick the home team? I'm going to go with Iowa. Garza outplays Smith. That makes perfect sense. All right, let's go number 5. How about number 6, Butler? They're going to visit the Dunk. They're going to take on a thus far disappointing Providence team that did get a big win against Marquette on the road. Is this the spot the Bulldogs get tripped up? They own a number 1 seed in Joe Lunardi's latest bracketology, which is like insane if you think about that. So when we talk, if you remember, listeners, dedicated listeners, if you remember last year, our good friend Eric Fawcett picked Butler to go to the Final Four last year. Our friend David Woods said that Butler might do some damage last year. I said that Butler had a chance to win the Big East last year. Were all of us just a year early on Butler, or what? I don't know. We love Kamar Baldwin. I think he's a stud. Mike, is Butler in trouble after Providence getting the win on the road against a good Marquette team?
Yeah, they're in trouble because I watched that meltdown against St. John's. Figueroa, no points. Heron doesn't play, and they self-destructed in the second half. It's Kamar Baldwin.
That's a good term, by the way.
It's Kamar Baldwin and no one else. I love McDermott. Big guy, where were you? They were in the bonus. They didn't D-up. They got killed on the boards. They got out-efforted. Kamar Baldwin's fantastic. But Providence, after a very slow start, is certainly hot. Home Texas, big win. Georgetown, no Mac McClung, fine. Still big win. At DePaul, quality win. Tonight in overtime at Marquette, quality win. So they're going the other way. Butler in this game, as per KenPom, is going to be favored by 5. Get out of here with that. I'm going to take Providence and the points for sure. Butler on the road after that St. John's meltdown. They've got to show me something here. I know it's Providence. I know you never know what you're going to get from them, but Pipkins is starting to shoot well. Diallo's really solid, does a lot of stuff. And to me, it's Baldwin, and that's it. McDermott was hiding in the corner of Carnesecca Arena. All he had to do was come forward, get the ball, get fouled, and make his free throws. Baldwin was on an island. That's a very revealing loss. Just like the Ohio State losses the last couple weeks maybe showed us that we overvalue them a little bit, although I still think they're good.
Right.
Though there's sometimes when losses don't matter. That loss mattered, Gus, because that should have been an easy 10-point win with no Figueroa scoring nothing, and he was in foul trouble, and no Heron, and they still melted down. And now you're going to go to the Dunk there against a super hot Providence team that just won at Marquette, and you're going to give me 5 points? Get out of here.
I'm kind of with you on that. And here's the other part I like about this too. Duke is playing really well. He's starting to find himself and find his role within this team. I think the roles were a little bit undefined early on, and I think that you mentioned Diallo's playing a little bit better. Pipkin's going to shoot the ball a little better. But I'll tell you what, Duke is starting to make a difference. He's starting to make a difference driving the ball to the hole. He's starting to make a difference as a big guard that can make difference-making plays. If you're going to give me points, it's very similar to the Big Ten conversation. You're going to give me points with Providence. I'm down with that. And let's go with the final game of the six-pack. We have 2 top 5 teams, Mike, this Saturday. Baylor visits Kansas, 2 of the top 5 teams in the country. Kansas was projected to be there. Baylor fought their way there. Can the Bears hang? I think that's the big question. I think that's a big question everybody has. Can the Bears hang with this Kansas team? And is this going to be like the legitimacy that they need to exist within the top 10 all season?
Well, let's see. Baylor last year lost to Kansas twice. The year before, They beat Kansas at home by 16, lose away by 3. And then we go back to 2018 just to complete this out here. Or that was 2018, rather. We go back to 2017, 3 years ago, and we take a look at that. And they ended up losing away at Kansas by 5. And then they lost at home by 2. So Kansas has owned this matchup. I'll be affected by what happens tonight with Texas Tech. Baylor is hanging in there with Texas Tech. That's very impressive. That's a tough back-to-back. What I will say is the key is Dotson. They can match up inside. Jared Butler's going to score. The wings are not great. You have to stop Dotson from penetrating. He's not shooting great, but he does get to the basket. Villanova was able to do that. So, Gus, to me, it's going to be a question of a line. Right now, it's Kansas giving 3. That would be right there for me. I think it's a really good question. I would lean Kansas at home, but this is interesting because Baylor's playing well tonight, and I thought they were going to get drilled by Texas Tech. So let's see what happens. Scott Drew, very underrated here. The Bears are live. I think they're very Dotson dependent, to a much lesser extent than Marquette is Marcus Howard dependent. But Correct. You take Devin Dotson out of there, it is not that much different than taking Cassius Winston off of Michigan State because they have not. Everybody else is sort of an amoeba-esque. You want to be excited about David McCormick, okay. Azubuike's okay. Okay, he's fine, but doesn't shoot the free throws well. So it's Devin Dotson dependent. That's the thing.
I have 2 things for the listeners out there. And this is goes back to my favorite football team. I think this might be Seahawk dependent. And what I mean by that is there was a trend for bettors in the NFL for a number of years with the Seahawks when they had the Legion of Doom. You just pick against the team that played the Seahawks the week prior. And maybe this is a situation where you just pick the team that played Texas Tech the week prior because they are going to beat you up. They're going to make you work for every possession. They are going to make you earn every basket. So maybe it's that type of situation where there's like a long-term effect on the time that you play Texas Tech, and then you go to your next road game, which is Kansas, which is a top 5 team, and maybe that just has elongated effect. So I think that's the first thing. And I think the second thing I think you need to pay attention to here is Butler going to be the best player on the court? If you have Butler from Baylor being the best player on the court, then they have a shot. If he's going to be ordinary, kind of like he's been tonight against Texas Tech, then I think we have a Kansas win. So I think those are the 2 things that you need to weigh in this particular game on Saturday with 2 top 5 teams. Is there a hangover effect against playing Texas Tech where they just got beat up and they don't want to get beat up again inside by Azubuike and the rest of the bigs on Kansas? And is Butler going to be the best player on the team? So that's where I'm at with that game. Is there any other personal stuff or any other stories that we can share with the listeners out there?
Well, why don't you share the story about your daughter, by the way, who could be playing at UConn by the time we end up having this pod and she's in college. I mean, that's one of the greatest stories I've ever heard.
All right. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to do this. Listeners, thank you for, imbibing in this. So my daughter is a baller daughter. She loves hoops. She plays and I'm so excited. And Mike is excited to be her fan and so on and so on. So we have her playing in 2 different leagues. She plays in an all boys league, where she's a starting point guard on her team. And then she plays in a girls league with her buddies from town. So we go to the boys team. We go to the boys league, first game on Saturday. She dominates, has 15 and 8. And we end up winning by 20. She's the best player on the court. We have the experience of we sit next to the parent from the other team and that's your daughter? Yes, that's my daughter. Oh, she's really good. Oh, thank you so much. She tries really hard. So on and so on. So then my daughter comes home and then she proceeds to she also likes musicals. So she proceeds to I was like, hey, honey, can you please take a rest? Take it easy between games. We're going to go to our girls game this afternoon. So on and so on. So she proceeds to dance around the living room and the dining room, listening to, musicals from Mamma Mia and various other things that she likes. She comes into me later on and says Daddy, my hand cracked. Great. Okay. Awesome. So then I feel her hand. It's definitely broken. So we go to the girls game and that's the team that I'm helping to coach. So I said, we can't abandon the girls game. You're going to come with me either way. You decide if you want to play one way or the other. She decides to play the second quarter. In the fourth quarter, so she plays the second game with the broken hand. It doesn't matter what happened in that game. The girls played amazing. We didn't have a ton of practice time and they played unbelievably hard, unbelievably well on the defensive end. We rebounded the ball like champs. We had a chance to win in the last possession. The crowning moment was the other coach was yelling at the defender for my daughter, make her go right. Make her go right, because all she did was dribble with her left hand and dominate people with her left hand. So somehow we're creating this into a positive where my girl is now going to be like the best left-hand dribbler of all time. So thank you for listening. I hope that you guys have a similar moment with your families where you're so proud of your family's toughness and her stick-to-itiveness and like her willingness to just want to play with her team. And then immediately after that, we walked out of the gym with the ice pack on her hand, and then we went to the ER right after that, and we have a broken hand. So now we have a brace on, no cast, thankfully, and hopefully in 2 or 3 weeks she'll be back doing her thing.
It's an amazing story. It's exactly what you want from your kids. Decision making, being able to like tough it out, have resiliency, and let me tell you something, folks, she's the real deal. That's an amazing story.
Daddy, I'll go in the second quarter. Thank God you're going to go to the
second quarter,
because this team is a disaster without you. So we were so happy to have her in the second quarter and the fourth quarter. It was great. The girls played unbelievable. I was so proud of them, and I can't wait to coach them next week. It's going to be fantastic. Mike, anything else for the listeners out there?
That's all I got, man. A lot of great stuff going on.
All right. So, listeners, here's what we're going to ask you to do. Please give the podcast a follow at SDS Podcast on Twitter. Efficiency of keystrokes, of course. Don't forget to give Mike a follow over at Randall Rant. He's going to give you all your picks that you need to know for the day. He's going to give you everything that's on his college basketball mind now that fantasy football is over. So please do that. Don't forget to give the podcast a kind review over at your podcast consumption vehicle of choice. Say nice things. Put 5 stars up. Say nice things about our guests. Say nice things about Mike. That's what we want to do. And then, listeners, Happy New Year. Enjoy everything out there. We hope that your resolutions are going exactly according to plan, and we will catch up with you before you know it. Cheers, Solancha, grazie, latia, arigato.
I'm addicted to the appetite. Took a seat in advance. I'm cozy in the candlelight.